Hi everyone, I'm back. So this is part 2 of my Hackintosh assembly. And if you have seen that video, well, you know what the situation is. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and click on that link and watch that video first before you proceed on this one. And for those who have seen that video, here's the next step that I took. So I went to Best Buy to pick up some new DDR4 memory, and this set of memory is made by Corsair. Now when I line up the grooves that usually tell you which memory goes on which motherboard, you can tell there's a big difference. And I know I got a comment saying that I bought the wrong memory, that I have DDR3, but these are actually labeled DDR4. So I know I was buying the right memory. So as you can tell by looking at this video, you can see that the memories are not lining up as far as the groove cut. Now if you look at the name and everything else on this memory, it is labeled as DDR4. Just like the Corsair memories, that's labeled DDR4 also. The only difference is they are not matching up with the groove. So somehow HyperX either mislabeled these memory or they just cut the groove in the wrong spot. Either way, it doesn't matter what the issue is as far as these HyperX memory. I can't really do anything with them right now, so I'm not going to worry about them right now. I'm going to use the Corsair to finish building my Hackintosh. So let's proceed in this video. So let's go ahead and install this memory since I know they fit this time because I did measure it up before I took it out of the package. So let's pull them out. So I installed the memory in the first slot because you got 4 slots. So since I only have 2, what I have to do is I have to skip one of the slots so I don't put these close to each other. So I will go to the next slot, which will match up the memory as far as how it's set up on the motherboard. Make sure they lock in place and the clips are in. The next set will go here and back here, and that will complete the full 64 gigabyte setup. So now that we got all that in, we got the SSD, we got the CPU, and we got the memory. Pretty much everything is done right here as far as installing on the motherboard. We got some cables we got to install, but that comes from the power supply, and then just the general connections between the power button and stuff like that. All that's part of the case. So once the motherboard get installed, then all those cables from the case and the power supply will get connected to the board. And then we're going to connect the cooling system for the CPU. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the case. I got to install the power supply, and then I'm going to mount the cooling fan for the CPU inside of here. The case has a glass cover, so it's pure glass. It's not shatterproof, so I got to make sure I be careful with it. I took these 4 screws off to remove the glass, and then I'm going to put it in a safe spot because I don't want it to break. So now that we got that out the way, we got to mount the power supply in here. So first I'm going to remove these screws right here, and I'll need a screwdriver. Now let's get the power supply out of the box. If you want to see a video of me previewing all this product, you know, check the channel, check the link I should say, and that should take you right to that. So you're going to need the screws that came with the power supply to mount it to the bracket. And there you have it. Now the power supply is installed, so that's out the way. And the way they built this case, they made it under this little cage right here so you can easily manage your cables without having them dangling all over the place. Because once you start attaching these cables, you know, they can be exposed. My current case have those cables dangling everywhere, but with this case it's going to make it nice and neat. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of this, which is the coolant. Okay, so the way this thing is set up as far as getting this fan on for the CPU, I have to remove those 3 fans that's already installed and mount it to this bracket right here. So in order to get to those fans, I had to take that first front plate off, which is this in my hand right here. Okay, so far so good. So we got the radiator installed. As you can see from these pictures, I had to remove the original screws that came with the fan that's already inside here and replace it with the ones that came with the kit. So actually the ones that came with the radiator are extras. So if this case didn't have these set of fans already installed, then I would install these first and then install the radiator. But since this case came from the exact same manufacturer as the radiator, it already had the fan installed, so I didn't have to worry about it. So these right now are spares. Or I can actually mount them in different places inside the case because there's still spot to install additional fan for additional coolant. So I got some options now. I can put them in the case or I can just keep them as spare. I might go ahead and mount them in there because there's additional slots available in this case for additional fans to be mounted. Because when it comes to computer system, you can't have enough coolant. So now that all that is done, as far as mounting the radiator, which goes to the CPU, I'm going to put the front plate back on. Well, I'll just wait. Let me go ahead and mount the motherboard in there first, and then all the parts that goes back on the case, I'll just put them all at one time. Okay, so now that we got this motherboard back up here on this platform, what we're going to do is mount the bracket where you can mount the coolant system, because in order for the coolant system to attach to the CPU, it needs something to hold on to, and that's what this bracket is for. It came with the coolant fan. So how you mount that part is you have to go from the bottom of the motherboard. So this little bracket right here goes on the bottom right here. There's 4 holes, so you just have to line it up with the holes and push it in place. And once it's in place, it's going to protrude out to the top of the motherboard. So those 4 little screw holes you see right there, that's the actual part that goes through the bottom. And then we have to keep it in place. So in the meantime, I'm going to grab some of these risers and screw it down so it doesn't pop back out, because it will have a tendency to fall back out to the bottom if you don't lock it in place. So the motherboard is very simple to install. All you have to do is line it up to where the back plate is showing outside the back of this case, and it's not interfering with anything but just the back plate. So once you get it in place, all you have to do is line it up with the risers, because there's a certain amount of screws, holes that's in here that you'd have to line it up with, and then it'll just fit snugly in place. Okay, so now that we got the risers in for the CPU mounting unit right here, the coolant part of it, then we're going to put this right on top and then use these 4 bolts right here to lock it in place. So on the bottom of this unit right here, there's some like terminal compound, and that actually creates a seal between this unit and the CPU. But I like to put my own set of terminal compound on here. So this is what I'm going to spray on top of here. Just a little dab, just to get it a nice seal when I mount that thing in place. So I'm just going to put a dab on the bottom of this thing right here to create that bond, like I said. Just enough in the middle. It'll spread out as you mount it on there. So then that's going to create a nice little seal between the CPU and this cooling unit. You always want to use like hand screwdrivers. Don't use the power tools on these things, because you can cause damage if you use a power tool. It seemed like a lot of work manually screwing this stuff in, but it's the safe way of doing it, because you won't damage anything, because you'll feel that snug and you'll know, okay, it's time for me to stop. I mean, if you have a lot of strength, you can actually break it too, so you just want to get it to snug. No need to over tighten. And there it is. It's in place. So now that's good. We got the CPU in place. We got the motherboard in place. So it's time to start doing some wire connections here. Okay, so I got all the cables connected to the motherboard. And this case comes with an excellent cable management. So when you look in there, you can't see all those cables dangling all over the place like my old case. So I'm glad I got this case and not some other case that would probably didn't have this kind of cable management system built in. Okay, so now the last thing I need to install in this case is the graphic card. So I'm going to put that into the slot, hook up the power cable to it, because this power cable connects to it, and then I should be ready to start installing the software. So for the graphic card, I decided to go with the Radeon RX 80. Just to see how that performed before I decided I want to upgrade to maybe the Vega later. So I'm going to install this right now, hook up the power cable to it, and then I'm going to show you what it's like fully assembled before I start putting all the panels back on so you can see what it looks like on the inside with that clean installation. Okay, so here's a final look at the case on the inside. Everything is installed, from the motherboard, the CPU, the coolant, the RAM, the graphics card, and all the cables. So we're all good to go now. Now it's time to put all the panels back on from the front to the sides and power this thing up and see what happens. Okay, so the assembly is complete. It powered on and everything seems like it's working fine. Now we just have to deal with the software part of it. And doing an Hackintosh is not a real smooth process. If you have done one before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't done one, you gotta have a little patience with it, because you can install the software, but then there's things that don't work, and software that's not gelling right, stuff freezes up, anything can happen. But you have to have the patience to work with it so you can get it working the way you want it to. So that's going to be a whole nother process right there. So this is going to be the end of part 2 of this project. So stay tuned for the conclusion of this project and my final name when I get everything up and running. I want to thank you for taking your time for watching this video. I look forward to see you next time. Have a good one.